The EarMen TR-Amp is a small portable DAC which is very impressive to say the least. Now it costs around $250 in the US and around £220 in the UK. If you're interested in purchasing it, the links in the description below will take you to the relevant places, and you'll also find some alternatives that you might want to consider and ones that I'll be referencing in this video. Now before proceeding with this review, if you have Instagram or Twitter, I'd very much appreciate a follow. It'll be on your screen, or indeed of course down in the description below. And if you're interested in keeping up with the latest news or reviews in terms of all electric or hybrid vehicles, do check out Totally EV. Your support would be equally appreciated. So to kick things off, what you get in the box is pretty simple. You've got a cable tie and a rubber band. I haven't seen these for quite a long time. Now inside you've also got a little carrying case, which is quite useful, and indeed it does fit the DAC itself. Now onto the DAC, it's actually a little bit of a hefty device. It actually weighs 240 grams, and in comparison to some of its competitors, you can definitely feel it. It's not something you'll want to place in your pocket. Nevertheless, in terms of the design of it, I really like the fact that it's built out of metal, a full aluminium frame. Now I can't say in terms of longevity how it's going to do in terms of scratches and things like that, but I can just imagine, like any sort of metal material, that it's going to be resilient to knocks and falls and things like that. But of course if you have keys and things like that, then yes, it's going to damage it in the long run. I do quite like the reddish look as well to it. I think it gives it a quite nice zing to it. Now in terms of the dimension, they'll be on your screen down below, but what I can tell you is that it's not as sleek and as portable as some of its competitors. Now the Audioengine D1 isn't exactly the most, it's not a portable DAC to say the least, but the iFi xDSD is definitely a portable DAC, and you can see that the differences are pretty stark in terms of the overall size, and as I said before, in terms of the weight itself, it does feel pretty hefty. Now in terms of portability, the reason why it's made as a portable DAC is because it can connect over USB Type-C to, let's say, a Type-C device. Now in my case, I have a Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus, and what I did via a Type-C to Type-A adapter with a Type-C to Type-A cable, I was able to play back music via my phone directly to the DAC, which is great to see and something that some of its competitors cannot offer. Now it's worth bearing in mind there's two USB Type-C inputs, one of which is dedicated for charging and the other one is dedicated for transmitting data. Initially I understood that the data input was also simultaneously charging the device, but it's not the case, because when I did run it down in terms of its battery, then I did find that the input, the data input, shall we say, does not charge the device. So you will need a dual Type-C input if you're going to be using it, let's say, on the go, and you want to have, I don't know, music playing and also having charge at the same time. Speaking of which, the battery itself lasted around 10 hours, which is what the manufacturer claims. So I'm pleasantly, not say surprised, but I'm pleased to say that it does last around 10 hours on a single charge. And of course, this is a brand new device. With any lithium-ion batteries, the more usage you have of it, the less battery you'll get over time. Now inputs aside, in terms of outputs, you have got a line output via RCA, and you've got also the ability to go pre-out or direct via a little switch toggle. And at the front of the device you've got a 6.3mm and 3.5mm outputs, which is really nice to see, and the fact that they can be simultaneously used at the same time. Not sure where you'd actually want to use that, but the fact that you've got the option and the fact that EarMen actually do provide you the option is really nice. Now the operation of the DAC itself couldn't be any simpler. The volume knob, when gone onto its minimum, turns it off, and there's a healthy little click sound which then switches it on, and you've got a illuminated LED which shows it's on. When the battery's low, it'll start flashing red, but you don't get any dropouts until it literally just cuts out when it's completely dead altogether. Now the volume wheel, or the volume knob should I say, isn't got a clicky feel, so for those people who might be placing this oddly in a pocket, you might be a little bit annoyed because then the volume wheel can be accidentally knocked. It's got a decent sort of, not say friction to it, but a decent sort of a resistance to it, but it's not as clicky, or it doesn't have a clicky type of feel like the iFi xDSD, for example, so therefore preventing from misuse to happen. So if those people who are aware of it it or want to know about that feature, then that's my little comment about it. But I had no issues whatsoever myself because I actually use this predominantly on my desk. Now before we move on, it is worth bearing in mind that this DAC does not have Bluetooth, unlike let's say the iFi xDSD, so therefore you do have to connect it up over a wired connection. But in terms of its wired connection, it does have 24-bit 384, it also have DSD 256 and natively DSD 128, and it also supports MQA for those people who are going to be using it with Tidal, which is really nice to see at this price point, and definitely something that does again set itself aside from some of its competitors. Now on that note, we get onto sound quality. Now housed inside the EarMen TR-Amp is a Sabre ES9038Q2M. Sorry, I have to read that out, but it's a reference DAC that is used within the DAC itself. Now, what I'm going to say over here is that the overall sound quality that you get is actually pretty impressive. Now, in terms of my setup, I had it predominantly connected up to my desktop computer over USB Type A to Type C. However, as I mentioned before, you can use it on the go, so to speak. Now, we'll get onto the on-the-go little mention in just a bit, but let's talk about sound quality. Now first off, in terms of bass, now I do like a decent amount of heft to my music, and I've got closed back headphones which are really known for having a little bit more oomph in the low end response. Now in this respect, I found that the sub bass on the TR-Amp was actually really impressive. It did extend really well. It's not as impressive as more expensive DACs out there, specifically more desktop amplifiers or DACs, but in terms of how this was able to portray that low end rumble was pretty impressive. Now what took me by surprise was the actual sheer amount of mid-bass that is on the TR-Amp. If you compare it to the iFi xDSD, which has got a little bit more of a rounded sound signature and a little less emphasis on the low end, the TR-Amp really does emphasize the mid-bass tones more than I expected. Maybe a little bit too much for some people's liking. In my case, I actually found it pretty fun, but you do really hear that warmth and that mid-bass tone. As a result, the lower mids are a little bit recessed, a little bit pushed back, and no matter in terms of your setup that you're going to be using it, in terms of the earphones or headphones that you're going to be using with the TR-Amp, you will find that the lower mids are a little bit pushed back. Not severely, but again, when you compare it to some of its competitors, you can definitely hear the difference. What I was, not say surprised to say, but in comparison to the Audioengine D1, which is a cheaper DAC, a desktop DAC, you did hear the difference between the two DACs, because here the TR-Amp really did have a much more higher emphasis on that mid-bass tone and therefore had much more of a V-shaped sort of sound signature. Nevertheless, the upper mids are done really well. They come across really well. They don't sound veiled or artificially boosted or anything like that, and they really do extend pretty well in that frequency range. As for the highs, I didn't feel that they were sibilant. I would say that the iFi xDSD is a tad sibilant in the top end and therefore can be a little bit ear-piercing depending on the volume that you use, but that wasn't the case with the TR-Amp. Now that's not to say that it's rounded off and it sounds kind of rolled off at the top end. Far from it. It actually does give you a good sort of resolution at that top end. Now in terms of Soundstage, here it was quite interesting because the TR-Amp actually did a phenomenal job. Here the instrument separation is done phenomenally well. In terms of the width and depth, this is something that really stood out in comparison to the Audioengine D1, but it was pretty much on par with the iFi xDSD in terms of the overall width and depth that you got from your music when you're listening to headphones or earphones. Now, in this respect, the Soundstage is definitely one of its fortes, and I definitely was impressed at this price point that what EarMen were able to achieve in terms of the overall Soundstage department. Now, what I want you to take away from this is the fact that the TR-Amp is very impressive in terms of the overall sound quality that you get from it. Specifically one that's considered as a portable DAC, one that has a built-in battery unit. Now if you were to go for a pure desktop DAC and you were just looking at desktop DACs, you should definitely consider the Audioengine D1 here, because while it doesn't deliver that same low-end grunt, it does do a slightly better job of giving a little bit more of a all-rounded presentation while sacrificing that soundstage that I talked about with the TR-Amp. What I'm trying to say here is that it is very impressive, but it is a V-shaped type of sound signature that you're going to get. You're going to get that mid-bass emphasis and something that is going to be able to drive any sort of headphones or earphones that you throw at it. Now, I tried a variety of low impedance headphones and earphones and had no issues whatsoever. For those people who have 600 ohm earphones, for example, or sorry, headphones, then you're really not going to have any problem, because I barely touched 20-30% in terms of the volume dial. If you're going to go any more than that, then you're not going to have any problems in terms of driving those high impedance headphones. Now, before we get on to my verdict, I do want to kind of address this kind of portability. Now, I know back in the days, when I say back in the days, I'm talking about a decade ago, people would carry around their phones housed along with the DAC, and they would take it around with them, and no matter the size, audiophiles would always consider something that they could plug into their device, be it a DAP or a phone, and consider it portable. For me, my definition of portable is something that I can place in my pocket and not have to think about it. That's not quite the case with the EarMen TR-Amp. You might disagree with me, so do let me know in the comments below. But the portability segment of it is more the fact that if you were to have a laptop, for example, or you just had your phone and you're going on a train journey or an airplane journey, and you wanted to connect it over to your phone via Type-C to Type-A or Type-C to Type-C, then you could do so and not have to worry about running out of juice. I mean, you would run out of juice in about 10 hours or so, but that's more than enough for a lot of people. So the portability segment of it, I'm not quite sold on it. I do understand there is a use case of it, so the fact that you don't need external power, but for example, the Audioengine D1 is a super portable DAC, but it's not meant to be a portable DAC. It's one that you would plug into your laptop or your PC. So as a result, if you're someone who's on the go and you have a computer, be it a Apple or Windows device or other, then what you'll find is the Audioengine D1 might actually be a more portable device while not housing a built-in battery unit. So that's just my take on the portability segment of it. I don't agree with companies really saying that it's a portable DAC or people trying to say it's a portable DAC, but that's just my opinion. As with audio, it's all very subjective, but that's just kind of my 2 cents about it. So this really all leads me on to my verdict. What do I make about the EarMen TR-Amp? Well, if you take away the portability side of it completely out of the equation and you just treat it as a desktop DAC on its own, then the EarMen TR-Amp is a very impressive device that really sets itself quite well in the market. It's slightly better than the Audioengine D1 in certain departments, and while it's not as good and as versatile as the iFi xDSD, you can of course find other solutions out there, ones I wouldn't have heard, but you might find other solutions out there which will give you a kind of middle ground as well. In this respect, I think EarMen have done a great job with the TR-Amp. I'm not too sold in terms of the portability element of it, but I can see where the use case might be for those people who want something that they can take on the go and not have to worry about external power supply. So with this in mind, I think the TR-Amp is a good choice, and I think it's definitely deserved of my performance award purely because of the overall performance that you get in terms of the sound that you get from this little device, depending on how little you think little is in terms of the DAC world. So that's just my thoughts about it. I'm definitely intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. If you've tried it or you're thinking about buying it, definitely let me know. And of course, do let me know in terms of that debate. Is something like this what you'd consider portable, or is it like me where you'd consider the iFi xDSD as something that's really a portable DAC, not only because of its Bluetooth inclusion, but also because of its slender and lightweight size and design. So hopefully you've enjoyed this review. If you have, give it a like, subscribe to see more, it's very much appreciated, and of course favourite and share if you feel this video will be helpful to a family and friend. Alright, I've been Totally Dubbed, take care of yourselves, and goodbye.